And then we've got a bunch more on the phone. Lights don't want to work. Housekeeping items, there's beverages and bathrooms right outside the door. The bathrooms are right around the corner. So if you need to use that, please do. For everybody that's online, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat during the course of the seminar. So if I see anything there, we'll go ahead and pop them out. We've got a few speakers for everybody today. The first is Joe Slavens from Northwest Bank and Trust Company and Stratman Solutions. Joe's a national expert in repurchase agreements. He's worked with the FDIC on kind of getting all the regulations in place, so he's going to tell us all about that. And then Ann Bailey from Stratman Solutions is going to tell you a little bit about their software solution that you can choose to utilize if you want to do a repurchase program. And then Riley Olson from Bankers Bank. He's a safekeeping representative. He's the one that actually does all the nuts and bolts of custody for repurchase agreements here at Bankers Bank. So I'll tell you how that works. So if you guys have questions, feel free to interrupt us, shoot them out. We'll field them as we go, but otherwise I'll just watch the chat. So I'm going to hand it off to you. We'll see if we can get this. Yeah, it's working now.
Is it forward and backward? Is that?
Yep. So this one here, I'll take you forward.
Very good.
In here.
Should have brought one of my grandchildren to operate.
Right, yeah,
How we learn
exactly.
everything.
We need coaching.
Yes. Well, hi, again, I'm Joe Slavens. My day job is President and CEO of Northwest Bank and Trust Company, where I've been, I guess it's my 35th year. I look in the mirror and I don't see the same guy that started there, but I still feel that way. When I joined, shortly after I joined the bank, that was when, we'll talk about in a minute here, the Government Securities Act of compliance sort of had kicked in, and you know how the new guy gets thrust into those sorts of things. So it sort of became my responsibility to become responsible for that. And so that's where this all started. Ultimately ended up with me publishing an article on compliance in 1996. And then we created what is now known as Stratman Solutions. I actually had a banker sort of down the street that connected us with this gentleman by the FDIC examiner and said, boy, you need to help other people be in compliance because we don't see anybody who's in compliance with this thing. Oh, by the way, I didn't put my stand. I've been doing this presentation for about 27 years. It obviously has evolved over that time period with changes in regulations, changes in circumstances, and obviously changes in interest. Again, we'll get into the history, but what I see as an interest in repos is whenever we have challenges within the banking industry, when everything's good, everybody thinks their bank is safe, right? They don't even worry about it. But what I think we talked earlier before we started, it's like they don't worry about it until they worry about it. And then suddenly something usually happens somewhere else. It's not us. And they come questioning, am I safe for more than, my deposit insurance limit? One other warning, I am a recovering attorney. I describe it this way, being an attorney, it's like being an alcoholic. It permanently changes your brain. And so you can, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. So once an attorney, always an attorney. So I'll again, give you that warning. So again, going to what we're here for today is to educate you on repurchase agreements to grow and protect customer deposits. So what is a repo? Again, we basically want to go back and break this down from the start. Legally, a repurchase agreement, repo, is an agreement to sell a security coupled with the obligation to repurchase that same security in the future, thus the term repurchase agreement. In financial markets, if you think about it, the accountants end up owning that part of the world, right? A repo is a secured borrowing. That's how it gets characterized on our call reports. That's how it gets characterized in a non-bank setting. Again, it's just simply a secured borrowing. For us, again, an overnight repo is a form of secured borrowing between the bank and the bank's customer with a 1 business day maturity. So basically, again, the theory of the legal side of it is I sell it to you and I've agreed to buy it back to you for a different price, a higher price tomorrow, that difference being the interest I'm going to pay you. The history of repos. Repos were originally developed as a term instrument. They were basically, you would go out and sell the security, you literally would sell the security to someone else with the obligation to buy it back, say in 90 days, 30 days, 180 days. And it was a way of providing funding to an organization that didn't want to dispose of it. It was, again, from their standpoint, it was still a secured borrowing, but it was done on a term basis. Repos with a one-day maturity, overnight repos, sweep repos, there's a lot of different nomenclature out there, were developed in the late 1970s and early 1980s to circumvent the Depression era regulation that prohibited the banks from paying interest on business checking accounts. And so these were set up, that was the original purpose that they were set up for, because they were not a deposit. And again, that's really the final bullet point. It is illegal for banks to collateralize deposits. And so funds above the applicable deposit insurance limits are automatically transferred or swept into a separate investment account. It is not a deposit. It's reported again separately on your financials, separately on your call report, but it is secured by the securities owned by the bank. So again, this is sort of one of those legal things. Don't spend a lot of time talking to customers about it because they think everything is a deposit, right? Got a question? Nope, okay. Okay. But so the bottom line is it moves over to the other borrowings, part of our statement in terms of the amount that we've swept over there. And again, we call it an investment account. Can't be called a deposit account. It can go on the same statement as long as it's got a label that doesn't imply or suggest that it is a deposit of the bank, because deposits are insured and deposits can be collateralized. Repos are not insured. They are secured, but they can be collateralized. Well, compliance always arrives at some point, right? And it's usually some sort of event. In this situation, with respect to repos, a bank fails in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Seems kind of interesting to me that my mom was born and raised about 20 miles from Mount Pleasant, a farm in Winfield, Iowa, for those of you familiar with Iowa geography. Again, as a lot of banks did in Iowa, the farm crisis, they failed. What they found out is that the senior leadership of the bank had done repurchase agreements with the same security with multiple different customers. So suddenly you had two customers come to you, and we're current customers on the other side. Think about this: if you do ag lending and somebody goes out and pledges their cows, their herd, and they pledge it to one bank, they pledge to another bank, or maybe another one, maybe you got a car dealer, they pledge the cars over here, they pledge the cars over there. Well, in this instance, the banker had learned from, so the bad guy customers how to do the same thing. So enter the government, obviously, to fix this, and the Government Securities Act of 1986 is passed. And that basically creates a distinction between holding custody repos, which are HICs, which basically the theory was that the bank held on to the security and was going to do a repo, and it didn't go someplace else to protect the customer. And tri-party repos, which was a form of a repo where basically we had the custodian that held, the customer was over here and the bank was here. In order for anything to move in the system, all three parties had to agree. And every time that took place. The HICs, you didn't have to do that. But what they ended up, so basically what you have is that tri-party repos, that worked from a term standpoint, right? Not that big a deal for the custodian, banker's bank, for the bank, for the customer to sign a piece of paper saying, yep, it's done, let's go ahead and rearrange things. If you're only gonna do that every 90, 180 days, something like that. But if you're gonna do it daily, if you're gonna do that all the time, you can't do a tri-party repo. I mean, with all due respect, the bank wouldn't want to put the staff on it, and then they wouldn't want to pay the fees the custodian would need in order to provide the labor to do that. So they came out with the rule that says, well, we're going to protect the customer by having them do a daily notification, the securities issuer, the maturity date, the coupon rate, the par amount, the market value, and either the QSIP or the mortgage-backed security pool number. The theory being, we're going to tell you what that is, so when the examiners come in, we'll be able to know that you aren't sending the same, it's kind of the car title license or the report you might get. You're not assigning that to everybody else, to another customer. So that was basically all of a sudden, oh my gosh, how do I comply with this requirement now? And that's where sort of, again, our systems were born internally in order for us to be able to do the allocations on a daily basis in order to tell our customers and provide those notifications that are still required to this day. Time on me here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go down a little tangent here because it's the most popular question I get, and that is, why only government securities? And the second question is, what are government securities? Because they're like, I have munis, I have corporates, why can't I repo them? Well, you can, but you don't want to. And the reason is because of the 1933 and 1934 Securities Act. When you do a repo of a government security, you're exempt from registration from the Government Securities Act, because it could be interpreted as a security. The repo itself could be interpreted as a security, and it's really easy to disclose. It's a government security. It's backed by the full faith and credit, the implied full faith and credit of the United States government. Disclosure is completed. Move over to the municipal world. Move over to the corporate world. Well, there's a question under the 33 Act, whether or not you have to register that repo as a security. And literally file an S1 with the SEC and get it approved. Now, even if that wasn't required, security, I grew up kind of in securities law as well in the beginning. It was very clear that you had a disclosure obligation. And now, you know, when you buy munis and you buy corporates, you get that prospectus, it's got all the information. All of a sudden, you'd have to give a copy of that to every one of your customers because you have to give disclosure of the nature of that security to that customer. Well, you're going to move those around, right? And of course, what's changed? You know, you bought the security, it was issued in, 2020, and here's 2023. How do you begin to provide the level of disclosure that the 34 Act would require to comply with that? So the only way to get around that is to use government securities. So it's not illegal per se. It would just be absolutely and unequivocally impossible to do anything but use government securities, which are listed here. Again, it's anything backed by the full faith and credit or the implied government guarantees. You've got treasuries, agencies, Ginnie Mae's, FHLBs, SBA, Fannie, Sally, FHA. There's some others, but this is pretty much the population that banks purchase in their portfolios from a government standpoint. Any questions?
Still is from Joss, the battery does.
Okay, very good. Well, so basically we're stable from a compliance standpoint until we roll around to Dodd-Frank. So in 2010, Dodd-Frank repeals the prohibition against paying interest on business checking accounts. Hooray, right? It makes it, we have all, again, I grew up in this sort of the era, and many of you probably did as well. It's like, go back to the old days, you had a checking account, a savings account, you had a CD. Then we had these things, money market accounts, and you had limited amount of transactions. So as we've modernized, we try and get rid of these, restrictions that don't make any sense, right? Why have this rule? And so we have that. Well, again, I'll use it, let's say long live, let's say that the king is dead, long live the king. Repos are dead, long live the repo. Because this all occurs during the Great Recession. We're at a moment in time where everybody goes, I don't trust my bank. And we really don't have much in terms of other products that we can provide. Certainly, we can't legally collateralize, right? We don't even have ED at that point to say, how can we structure your account? We can do a little bit of that. I think reciprocal deposits are maybe just being born. We don't know much about those. But what we do figure out is, you know what? This has this secondary purpose. The repos can collateralize these balances that are in excess of FDIC insurance limits. And so we have, if you will, an ongoing purpose for them that exists to this day. And maybe I should be careful with this metaphor, but it sort of reminds me of the diabetes drug that's been talked about, in terms of weight loss. This is sort of an unintended kind of consequence. Nobody ever thought the repos would be there for this purpose. They were really all invented to pay interest on business checking accounts, but all of a sudden it's like going, whoa, this actually serves a purpose during the Great Recession because we're concerned about our banks and we need to provide a product that will do that. So I like to say that, what's really evolved is the better sweep repo. The question I ask is, what if you could combine the logistical simplicity of a HIC, a holding custody, with the additional protection that is provided by a tri-party repo? Again, that tri-party repo has the custodian out there saying, I'm going to protect you and make sure that there's somebody who's overlooking this because I don't really want to pay attention. I want to do the logistics of this. But it provided the simplicity of a HIC, if you will, that the simplicity, with the protection of a tri-party. So I've got somebody overlooking this, but I'm still considered a HIC in terms of I don't have to touch it every time I move a security. Well, the point is you can. So let me go down the sort of what's the issue here? This is what I call compliance tangent number 2. If you read the literature, everybody's like, well, can I just provide a pool of securities? Have you heard? I don't know if any of you have heard that term. I'm just going to set this aside, and I'm going to tell my customers, on average, the customers have $2 million, and I got $3 million of securities sitting in this this pool. Makes logical sense. Doesn't apply with the GSA. As we all know in bank regulation, logic does not always prevail. Maybe that's being even kind at this point. So the point is we can create what I call pooling without pooling. So I probably should put that in quotes. So it's pooling effectively without violating the rules that are out there from pooling that the regulations have in interest by using fractional interest. So basically what you do is you put this pool of securities out here that's in your system, that's assigned to it's with your custodian, and it's the ones you're going to use for sweeps. And every day, in addition to providing that information about the security, you have a software program or an individual, whichever way you want to do it. It's a lot easier with software. They assign a fractional interest. They say, okay, customer A, you get 10% of the security. Customer B, you get 15% of the security. So from the bank standpoint, we now have the advantage of having a pool that we just reassign on a daily basis. From a custodian standpoint, they look at the report saying, yeah, those are securities you got. They add up to less than 100%. We're good to go. Well, the customers throw the disclosures away anyway, right? Or then out today, they hit delete on their email. They don't even look at this stuff. Now, here's a little helpful hint that came along as a regulation. And again, I'd be happy to provide citations to any of this stuff. Again, that the lawyer in me kind of wants to have, look footnotes and everything. And at the end of the day, this is the rule. We can look them all up. I'd rather be conversational here. One of the regulations that came out, again, kind of around after the ruling on you couldn't do pooling, but people had invented the idea of a fractional interest, was they said, we're going to apply a rule that all these securities that are issued in what's called a minimum transferable denomination. So if I actually took the security, we all buy them in what, $500,000, million, $5 million, $10 million blocks. But if you read into the depths of all these documents, they say somebody can buy as little as $1,000 of this. That's how you could actually go and buy it. But you can't buy $500 worth. So when you do the math and when you do the confirmation, not only does it have to be the appropriate fractional interest based upon the market value of the security, you then have to round up to the nearest minimum transferable denomination. Because if you round down, they're undersecured. If you round up, they'll be happy they're oversecured a little bit. And in the theoretical world where you close and the custodian says, here, you dispose of it, they get a minimum transferable denomination, and they're not stuck with an odd lot, I think would be the term in the stock world, if you will. So that's part of the process when you assign the collateral. Again, first it has to be it's assigned based upon the market value, and then you round up to the minimum transferable value and express that as a percentage of the entire security that you have. Simple math, but a little bit of a complication that is thrown in there. Any questions are coming in? I would say that as long as I invite the questions from you here or from the folks there, as long as you don't mind if my possible answers, I'll get to that. But, okay. Help?
Just works when it wants to work.
Okay. Well, there's a joke there, but I'm not going to. I've been married 37 years. I know better than to go on that joke. So the Better Sweep repo, there's really, at the end of the day, three components to solving the riddle of how we do this. The first one is our interaction with the customer. The agreement that you sign for an overnight repo should appoint the custodian as their agent to possess and perfect the collateral interest. Everybody always asks me the question, well, why do you have to do that? There's nothing in the GSA that requires this. But we're all bankers. And I guess I'd ask anybody in the room if they've had much success, if they lent against negotiable instruments, about you say, I want to borrow against this stock, or I want to borrow against this bond. But you know what? Why don't you let me keep it? It works with a car because you got a title. It works with a house because you got a title. But we all know negotiable instruments, e.g. the term negotiable instruments, could be negotiated. So I don't know any banker that I've ever met that says, you know what? Yeah, I'll lend you against that treasury bill and you just hang on to it. Doesn't work out very well. So under the Uniform Commercial Code, the way that we all get perfection on a negotiable instrument is we take it out of the hands of the customer and we either take it as the bank or we give it to a custodian on behalf of the bank. Well, we all know in this situation that the customer doesn't want to hold that security. And it would be, can you imagine every day, okay, I'm going to open an account at the Fed for my customer, I'm going to put 10% a year, and every day I'm going to make all these transactions. And of course, they would never accept fractional interest, right? We wouldn't want to break them down and do that. So again, this is part of that pooling without pooling concept, is we give the pool, again, nobody can do that, he's watching. We give the pool to the custodian, and then we assign the fractional interest on a daily basis. We've complied with the GSA by providing the notification. We copy that over to the custodian. The custodian holds it in perfection. And if the bank fails, something goes wrong, the custodian's out of your hand, and we don't have the banker sitting there saying, I can either double assign this or I can sell it myself. Because we wouldn't ever ask something of our customers that we wouldn't ask of ourselves, right? Again, we wouldn't lend to them based upon them holding on collateral. We shouldn't do the same thing. So that's the first part, is the customer appointing them as a part of the agreement. The custodian's job, a little more on that maybe later here, they hold the government securities. Again, so that basically allows you to satisfy the perfection requirements. You know, one of the great esoteric things, okay, I'll go out of recovery for a moment as a lawyer. The way the FDIC's regulations are written is they basically look at it, and if a bank fails and they're going to close you down, they come in and look at your program and they say, was it compliant? Was it, you know, did you follow the rules in terms of how we want to do it? There's a technical term that they use, but that's basically what they're saying. Is did we follow the rules? That binds the FDIC. And again, we all know, I guess we've never had an experience where somebody has fought too much. But you know, if I was an unsecured creditor of a bank and I got burned and the FDIC decided that I was going to take a discount, I could look at the repo program if it was significant. And if they hadn't done this, I could make a claim against the FDIC that under state law would be superior to the FDIC's claim. So my customer at that moment is at risk in that situation. I understand it's a strange hypothetical, but it's, I guess my point is we all use custodians, right? I don't know anybody who's self-holding, you know, their securities. So why not have the custodian be in the position of not only, even though it's not required by the Government Securities Act, why not be in a position to where we fully protected our customer and done exactly what we've expected of them and give them that security of UCC perfection under state law, so nobody can create that theoretical claim to go and try and get that money out of our customer in the future. The custodian permits changes to government securities as needed. You know, you make those changes now, but now all they have to say is for this pool that you've set aside over here that's pledged, oh, okay, one of two things happens. Either I replace it with, you know, security of the same amount or larger amount, or I just look at your report and say, oh yeah, you only have $2 million worth of customers in your repos, and you got $5 million of securities. Fine, we'll release that. It's one extra step for them, pretty easy for them to do. But they'll make those changes. There's no my point is, there's no interference as long as you're keeping enough collateral in the pool. There's no problem with you doing whatever trading activities you want to do with respect to your investment portfolio. And again, they review the customer reports every day to look at it and say, yep, those are securities they got. And they don't total more than 100%. We're good. Put that in the file, and we're done. The bank, they deliver the government securities to the custodian. Actually, as you all know, we probably have our broker do it. You know, that's what we never touch them ourselves. But they can trade as much as they want. They assign and reassign the collateral daily. So they're the ones doing the instruction that says, okay, I guess we'll get it to a minute, but we're going to decide who gets which parts of which securities. They deliver the GSA notices on a daily basis. So they produce and say, okay, you have this security and you have this fractional interest, and we provide that notification. And then they deliver a summary. That's the custodian said, yep, here's all the ones we sent. Just to confirm, we didn't do what Mount Pleasant did. We didn't assign securities to more customers than we actually had securities on file. It's not a legal presentation unless you have footnotes, so I thought I'd have to add them here. So the footnote to the custodial agreement is that the bank and the customer enter into a properly drafted and executed agreement. It covers lots of different things about how the program functionally works, but the most important thing is that they are naming the custodian as the person who's been acting as their agent. Little hint here for you that sometimes gets forgotten, and that is that in that agreement, you need to waive the right of substitution first. What that means is, this is a GSA thing that says, you know, if you did a 90, say you did a 90 or 100-day repo, you might go, what if I want to sell that security? I want to have the right of substitution, right? I want to be able to give you something new. This is sort of one of those gray, strange areas in the law because it's an overnight repo. Can you even imagine, how would you ever do substitution on an overnight repo? You signed it today. This tomorrow. I mean, why would you ever do it? Well, the simple thing to say is because the GSA goes like freaky over this whole substitution thing is, I'm going to waive that. This is a daily thing. Again, remember, it was really only supposed to apply when the regulations were drafted to things that were lasting 90 to 180 days. We may substitute on a daily basis, but that's what people get confused about. That's not substitution. That's saying you had your thing today, I'm going to give you a different one tomorrow and a different security or a different fractional interest the next day. That's not substitution, so you might as well waive it, and that makes the examiners much more happy. The second is as a part of the changes to the regulations, I'm trying to think which one it was. I think it was the regulation that came out when the FDIC did their updated their resolution regulation. They included a disclosure. It's an actual, you know, it's just like everything we do in banking, right? here's the safe harbor disclosure that you make to somebody who's buying a repo. And it's actually printed in the regulation. So you want to be able to be sure in your agreements that includes that required disclosure. Number two, the bank and the custodian enter into a properly drafted custodial agreement. Again, so everybody knows what their job is. We want to make sure that all these agreements fit together. So the bank and the custodian agreement, which the custodian does not sign, it just refers to this agreement, and the bank and the custodian just sign that agreement. So they all fit together hand in glove. And the third piece is that the bank completes the collateral allocation, since the daily notifications, as a part of its end of day processing. So there's really two things going on here. First is that you remember that disclosure we talked about earlier, thing you have to do every day. This is the elements, the security issuer, the par, the market value, the fractional, just all that kind of stuff. That has to go out every day. Again, when we started this, it was kind of silly. We had to mail this stuff. But, in the way the world worked, by the time they got it, it was over. It's kind of a strange situation. But that's what the law required. That's all we had. Fortunately, with email, it's cheaper and it's automated. It's easy. You can set that kind of stuff up. So you're going to send your daily notification. Now, here's the little kicker that gets the subject to interpretation. The way the law reads is it must be a part of the bank's end of day processing. Let's break that down a little bit. So y'all, we're not in real-time banking, right? Most of us are still on a batch process where we close the teller line. We all go home and the big computers and I don't know what the big service bureaus are here in town. They do all the crunching, right? They make everything balance and work. You come in the morning and you say, okay, we're going to open the bank based on what happened last night. Well, you really can't, you don't know how much people have on deposit, right, until the stuff runs. The checks come through, the automatic, the ACHs come through, and you're always like, okay, here's your balance. Well, did you have more than $250,000 or less than $250,000 in the account? And how much? Well, I don't know that until what I call the second to last step of end-of-day processing. You come in the morning, you say, oh, Charlie had $375,000 in an account. I better transfer $125,000. Now, the computer system's already done it. The computer system's set up. It just says whatever's over $250,000 in Charlie's account, move that over to investment account B. So it'll show on your system that all the cores are prepared to do this. But now I have to do, okay, I got $125,000. I got to look at Charlie's account and Bill's account and Ann's account. I got to put them, upload that into a separate system or do my math by hand, whichever way you want to do it. And I need to send out my notifications to folks. Technically, my interpretation of that is you're supposed to do that before you open for business. So whenever the teller line opens, you ought to be running this final step before that happens. The good news is I've yet to have an examiner ever question, as long as you did it that morning, they've never questioned that issue. And again, I would say that the only time this is really relevant is two. Number one is when you have an exam. We all know that the examiners are important. If they ask that question, okay, sure, we'll have Sally come in at 7:55 and she can run, she can do the work and we'll send it out. And the other one is when the FDIC arrives on Friday, which none of us want to have the FDIC arrive on Friday, right? They arrive on Friday and they got so many other things going on that they look at your history. Were you doing these? And nothing's particularly time-stamped or whatever. So they say, okay, I got done. As long as you were doing it on a daily basis, they're going to, everything, they have never disqualified anyone for the time of day they're going to do it. But again, the lawyer in me wants to say 7:55, guys, or if you open at 8:55, whatever that is to get that stuff done. But again, I've not had that question come up, and probably not. I guess we've probably been, again, we created a program to do all this for you. I'm not supposed to be doing the sales pitch here, but that's Ann's job. But I've probably consulted on, oh my goodness, well over 1,000 exam inquiries for repos, and I've never had anybody ask this question. It's also, I don't believe it asks it, because the question is end of day process. They don't say what that means. They just say, is it the last step, if you will. And I suppose theoretically, you can still be, given the way banking works, you can still be processing, throughout the day. Okay, next slide. I like to, we get into the business side a little bit here. There is really one program, only one program prerequisite, and that is that a bank already owns or wants to purchase government securities. So let's break that down again. Most banks, have some of those on their balance sheet. Most of them today, which they didn't. But the good news about that is it means you're going to have them for a while until the markets change. until they, let's say, earn their way out of it. We were talking about that a little earlier. So why not take advantage of the fact that you've got this stable security that you're probably not going to change out of if you've already got it. The other side of that, again, the market shift and change, as you all know, or you're willing to make a purchase of those securities because it's a good arbitrage. One of the things we'll talk about a little bit later here is you set the rate on a repo. You can tier it. You can have it be a flat rate. It can be an index. It can be whatever Alco sets it on. You can treat this just like any other product that you have in your total and complete control. So if you go out and buy I don't run our bank's investment portfolio. What can I get on a 1 year right now?
It's like 550.
550. And I can pay this depositor 450. Who here doesn't want a positive arbitrage of 100 basis points? So if I either have them, great, that's easy. But if I can go raise money because people are not being protected, I got a new account coming in. If I can go buy at 550 and pay them 450 to put the money in the bank, and again, we do this all the time. It's going, we'll give you security on this. And we explain the program to them. They're like, really? So if something happens to the bank, I get security? Yep. Sounds good to me. Sign me up. And they feel like it's even safer and simpler than going through the FDIC resolution process. So we're actually able to pay a lower rate on our repos because we've explained the nature of the protection they're receiving. So the point is, think about this to say, if you can get the money, don't be so worried at this moment in time. Now, if you're worried about your ALM model, in terms of, well, I don't want to buy anything short, I'd rather buy long. Okay, well, that's a different issue. Think about rearranging. But if you are either already own or are willing to purchase government securities with the new funding that comes in, you can do a repo program. Speaks for itself. Again, it goes back to what really happened what happened in 2010, 2008, 2010. It happened again today in terms of what they do this year. People don't worry about their bank until they do. We're in a time when we do. We're very fortunate. We have the program obviously at Northwest Bank and Trust Company. We have people who didn't care. The minute Silicon Valley had happened, we contacted all of our depositors with relationships larger than $250,000 and offered them to be in a repo. Some took it, some didn't. Those that took it actually got a lower rate than those that didn't take it and stayed in an uninsured product. So we make more, even though we already had the securities, we actually enhanced our profitability by offering them more protection. Very good deal. So here's the question we get asked all the time. Why not reciprocals? And there's an end to this story, but the beginning of the story is greater control. You don't have a partner, you have a custodian partner that's going to do their work. You set the fees, you set the rates, you control the allocation of securities, you control what securities you're using in the program. There's nobody that's a partner out there that has to sign an agreement with your bank. Because, and again, I want to be real careful. Reciprocals have a place. I have no hesitation about that whatsoever. They're one of the arrows we have to have in the quiver. But you don't set the rates on reciprocals, do you? They set them. They tell you what you're going to pay on the rates. So you also have no dependency on a vendor. There's no vendor issue here in terms of, and again, I actually got into an American banker chatbot war with one of the reciprocal guys about 10 years ago. To me, repos are like this transparency thing. I can show you everything and how it works. I think we all sort of wonder about the black box, if you will, that goes on with reciprocals. There's sort of this black box magic as I look at it. I understand we move it here, we move it there, but who gets the money, how much, what's the system, what's the clearing, and so you're not dependent upon a third party and the potential for their failures. It's all internal to you. Lower costs, higher profit. You don't pay any transaction fees. Really, again, with a reciprocal, you pay about 10, 12 basis points and a setup fee. Because, again, you're handling this all entirely yourself. You're already going to use probably the same custodian that you're already using, so there shouldn't be any additional fees of significance there. And here's the big one that everybody forgets. And the other ones, you don't set the interest rate. With repos, you do. And so you can sit down and say, instead of paying I don't know, they're paying 5.5 right now, you can pay whatever it is you think you need, whether it's tiered or based upon the relationship you've built. You can do relationship pricing, you can do individual pricing, you can do custom, you can do across the board pricing. You can save anywhere from at least 25 to maybe 2 points on the money that you're using to fund. That's real money. If you've got significant money that's demanding protection, you're no longer just simply saying whatever R&T or whatever IntraFi tells me the rate is, That's the rate that I have to pay on an overnight sweep. You now have the ability to do that. I mean, again, I don't know how, 10 million bucks and you can save, 2 points. I don't know, again, that's real money here in the Midwest. And you go, we have clients in big cities. Again, I'm stealthy part, but they're running billions through repos. Think about the spreads that they're creating and the dollars that they're dropping to their bottom line because of that. And again, I want to be really careful because again, I think there's repo, but I don't know, have you all been playing with Bard or ChatGPT yet a little bit? It's really, I know I was like scared, okay, I'll be honest. But I went out, and this is slightly off topic, and I went to Bard, which is the new one, and I said, prepare a job description for a FACTA officer. Did a damn good job of giving me a first draft of a FACTA officer job description. Well, one of the things we did, again, I'm going to leave it to you if you want to do this to learn how to start to play with chat. We asked ChatGPT, what are the downsides of using a reciprocal deposit network? I'll let you look at it yourself. If you want, look at the same question. What are the downsides of using a repo sweep program? It's not perfect. There's still about 80–90% accurate, but have some fun with that. Ask it other questions about banking. Again, it's very quickly advancing to giving, in my opinion, what I would call great first drafts. And, I love, again, this lawyer in me, I love being the guy who's the editor and, right, kind of saying, okay, how I want to change this. I don't like, blank sheet of paper or blank screen. That's hard, isn't it? If you ask ChatGPT, Bard to do these things for you or have your staff do these things, the first drafts that come out are good and really get people started on that. So there's an advertisement for that. Why not BTFP? I think this is a little more of a bank term funding program. They seem to come out with these sorts of programs whenever there's a crisis in banking. The really slick thing, if you're not familiar with it, is that they allow you to borrow 100% of the par value of the security and not just the market value. So that's kind of the key on that one. In contrast, repo sweeps deliver core funding. Banking to me is it's about using all the tools that are out there. But at the end of the day, I sort of think that we only have two things going for us in banking. We have our ability to generate deposits as a lower cost funding source, and we have our ability to generate quality assets. No matter what, whatever, if you're doing, home equities, you're doing commercial real estate, I don't care what you're doing. And that creates the net interest margin, whatever the fees that we're able to generate that in that interim, if you will. BTF does none of that. It's a short-term solution. It's a Band-Aid if you've got a problem. Again, we'll talk about using all these sorts of things, but it does not advance your business to use the BTFP. Second one is no stigma, and again, I don't know how much this impacts how this is going to unfold. But the story I will tell on number one, there's an article in the American Banker recently that talked about that the analysts are now checking to see which regionals are using BTFP to decide who they're to short. So it's public knowledge who uses it, and just the fact that you're using it for some audiences is viewed as a negative. I'm reminded back when TARP came out. Had again, I don't know if any of you know the name Wayne Veselski. Wayne ran correspondent banking at LaSalle National Bank when they were one of the premium providers of correspondent banking services before they were bought by Bank of America. He said, Joe, don't take the money. Everybody will know. And whether you need, unless you really need it, he retired, he come on the board of directors. He said, the reality is, if you take it and you didn't need it, people are going to think you needed it. And that's bad. And so don't take it unless you absolutely need it. No, we didn't need it. We didn't take it. My suspicion is most of the community banks didn't as well. I don't know what that means, but there's a stigma associated with these programs, whether the government likes it or not. It's a way, again, it's a means to an end, and that's to create some liquidity if you need it, but it's a short-term solution. It's not long-term funding, and it comes with that downside. The other one is it's expensive as all get out. Again, it's much higher cost in terms of, it's a market-based rate as opposed to our ability to raise core funding from our local folks that, again, that aren't checking Wall Street every day, to know what the bond rates are. We have the opportunity to do that for them. I'm going to pay them a fair rate, but we don't have to pay them the cost of the BTFP. It's an expensive Band-Aid. Next slide. So again, the better question, why not all three? If you need the liquidity instantly today, absolutely, I'm an advocate of utilizing the government program if you need it. Of course, needs always interesting. How much liquidity is enough? That's ultimately for, you as bank management to decide. Maybe your board, leans in, how are you positioned in terms of your concerns from a liquidity standpoint? Reciprocals, absolutely a place in this world for reciprocals, and in part because people are familiar with them now, and people may even come in to request that product. But on the flip side, sweep accounts, more control. Some customers are more comfortable with them, and you'll be able to save money by offering them, both in terms of transactional costs and the interest rates that you pay. So again, I'm old. Banking started, I think, with, checking accounts, added savings, and we added CDs, and we added money market accounts, treasury services. The point is, nobody goes to the marketplace with one arrow. We go with multiple arrows to see what fits our balance sheet, what fits our current situation, and what fits the needs of the consumer. Again, I think, our recommendation is that you go and be able to say, what are you more comfortable with your folks? Again, depending on the level of people who are having those conversations and what your needs are at that moment in time. Sometimes, we all know we offer A because we'd like them to buy A, but if they ask for B, we've got B in our hip pocket. Sometimes we offer both of them to the customer. So again, I'm a firm believer in having all of these options available to us at all times. Okay. We've got
I've got a couple for you here.
Okay, good. The questions.
So somebody asked about compliance. Can you just hit on like the high points of kind of the check boxes people have to have in place for compliance? Sure.
I would say, to me, it goes back to an earlier slide, that the check boxes for compliance would be that you have an agreement with your customer, that's the appropriate form of the agreement, that's actually signed and in their file, so that when the examiners come, they can see, it's like the deposit, the deposit account agreement. It's the first agreement. The second is they're going to want to see the custodial agreement to make sure that you signed up with a custodian to hold your securities. And the big one that they're going to look at is your daily notifications. They're going to want to make sure that when they look at your, they download that date that they do the exam as of, and they say, hey, Charlie had 125,000 in the sweep account and Bill had 300,000. They're going to want to see that you did the notifications that day, and you'll have to produce the actual notifications that you sent to them, whether you mailed them or emailed them or they picked them up or whatever. So those are the three critical points. Now, within each one of those, again, there's technicalities. They're going to look at the agreement picture. It has the disclosures that describes the program appropriately. And here's my favorite. You're actually following the agreement. I know we all get guilty of thinking we're following the agreement, and then 5 years go by, and suddenly we've changed some internal procedure. Something's happened. We're not following the agreement. Haven't had any problems with custodial really, other than make sure they're signed. And again, they like to dig into those notifications. Did everybody get one? Did they get it timely? The day after? And it's the computation. They love to do this fractional interest computation where they go in, they say, okay, Charlie had 125,000. The market value was $1 million, so he's supposed to get 12.5%. But with interest, et cetera, with the daily accruals, this is actually they should get 12.6%. But we got around now the minimum transferable nomination, which means we got to get them 13%. So they just love, it's almost like a Reg Z exam at that point, where they go and do the telecomputations. They just love to find out that your math is wrong.
This is just a question for me. You mentioned timely notification. So are they looking at when your emails go out?
I haven't had anybody do that yet. I will say, in terms of the, I haven't had anybody criticize for doing it that morning. Let's put it that way. Again, it's part of the end-of-the-day processing. That's a fuzzy one from my standpoint. Again, most people have, they use an automated system. Most of it gets downloaded. Click a few buttons and they send it out, so it doesn't take very long. If you're doing it by hand, it's harder. Again, I think as long as you send it that day, you'd be okay. But I think the longer the day you go, the more at risk you are for criticism.
There's another question here too about liquidity. How can you use repos to raise liquidity?
Sure, it goes back to your balance sheet management, in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Do you have the government securities? Obviously, this allows you to pledge those government securities. They become a pledged security, which is, again, sort of the countervailing side of liquidity. So now they're pledged, so they're not available for sale. The reality is, if they're underwater, they're not available for sale anyway. You're not going to sell them and take that hit. So is there a practical impact for your liquidity? Probably not if you're using the securities. I would recommend actually using the securities that are most underwater, because those are the ones that are least likely to be sold as far as your collateral is concerned. Obviously, if you're using it to go get new deposits, you've enhanced your liquidity. So it's all situational in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And again, as we all know in bankers, this is all about risk trade-offs. I'll compare it. You get instant liquidity in near term with the bank term lending program. That's great. But at what sort of long-term cost to your business model? Reciprocals, again, you give up control. You give up the rate that you're going to pay. Everything's a trade-off. If you're going to make substantially more money and you're only going to use securities that are kind of underwater and they were held to maturity, they're not counting in your liquidity computation anyway, right? So it's all situational in terms of how you want to balance your management. Again, at any given time, repos are not for everyone. There's probably a cycle when they are, for you. And there'll be times when it floats out. That's why you want to have all the tools in your toolkit.
Another user just typed in, what kind of customers can use repurchase agreements? Is it limited to consumers, businesses, municipalities?
So in the old days, we limited them to business customers. And there were two reasons for that. Number one is our primary intention was to pay interest to them on somebody who wasn't going to get interest. So if that's what we're trying to accomplish, why wouldn't you only go with the only population you couldn't pay interest to on their transactional accounts? The second, again, sorry, go to my legal thing. There was sort of this theory that businesses are sophisticated and people are not. So do you have what's called in the securities industry a suitability question? You ever heard that term in terms of, is this a suitable investment? Well, if it's a security, is it suitable? That was also at a time when this started, when FDIC insurance was like $10,000. Well, we've now gone to $250,000. I don't think there's any securities lawyer in the world that wouldn't say a repo is a suitable investment for somebody who has more than $250,000. So I have not heard any criticism of offering it to any entity, nonprofit, for-profit, or individual for them to be in a sweep account program. If they've got more than $250,000, that's considered a suitable instrument and they get protection.
They touched on municipalities too for depositors. Is there a pro and con between using a repo for a municipal depositor versus a public depositor?
Yeah, this becomes very much a state by state situation. In Iowa, we have sort of this reinsurance program, if you're familiar with it, where if a public entity were to lose their deposit, they would call upon all the banks that had public deposits in proportion to the total amount of public deposits. There'd be this math program, and they'd send you a bill if that took place. Other states do require pledging. The question is does the repo fit the pledging structure of that state? Actually, again, I can't help myself. We actually offer, again, Stratton Solutions has two products that are related to this. One is for repos. If it works for your state to do a repo, that municipality, they can stay in the repo and they can be in there with the other businesses and individuals. Most of the states that doesn't work very well, so we have a product called Collateralized Deposit Manager. It does all the same thing. It says every day, what are all my municipalities and what do I want to pledge to them? And it even goes and says, because then, this is the great thing, you can use munis, you can use CDs, you can use letters of credit, you can use corporates. It depends on their policy and what your state law and what the policy of that municipality is. So you can use that portfolio to pledge and protect and meet all the pledging requirements for municipalities. And it's, like I said, same thing, assigns it every day or every 5. That one doesn't have to run every day. There's no law on that. If the balances are not shifting or they don't require it, you can literally reassign that every week or every month and just run a report to them saying, here's what you have for the month. And it's a very slick tool that basically uses the same concepts as this does, but applies it to the handling of all your municipal deposits.
More about fee structure. This might overlap with Ann as well, but what's the fee structure typically that a bank charges? Like you touched on margin earlier, like what do you see? We've
seen everything, and again, I'm giving you data over a, what would you call it, a 27-year period here now. When these first came out, people were charging $100 a month per account to have this feature added to the account. It's like a treasury management feature that you would add. Some banks gave it, and then what they would do is they'd pay a little higher rate. That was kind of the trade-off that people, it's okay, we're going to, we'll index it for you, but we're going to make it on the fee. Some markets allowed you to charge a fee and get a lower rate. Some said, I'm going to waive the fee. I'm going to charge you a low rate. I'm going to be, and again, either a rate that I tell you what it is or a rate that is based off an index that I'm going to abide by as a part of that. So again, the nice thing about repos, it's different from many other products, is you can fit it into your business strategy however you want to. You want to be, if your market loves rate, charge the fee. If your market hates fees, lower the rate.
That's what we've got right now.
I had a question, Jen. So have you seen, like in all your experience, you've seen situations where the protections actually worked in real life? In other words, FDIC comes in, pulls down a bank, they go to the repo, they can't touch the repo bonds or, in this, have you seen that?
Yep. So here's what I can tell you is since Mount Pleasant Bank, there's been no bank that's closed that's had a repo program that the customer's lost their money. The same thing with reciprocal. So it's, we're both undefeated, if you will, as far as the FDIC is concerned.
I will say that the repos went through the 2008 bank crisis and they had the FDIC, if I'm not mistaken, calling you guys asking, how do we unwind these agreements? And you're like, you don't. And so they had to pay them out.
That's it. They had to learn as a part of their closing. I mean, there was a team that was responsible for that, writing the regulations. I didn't always agree with what they came up with. I thought they were a little, in the backside, I thought they were a little too fuzzy, a little too maybe easy on some things. I think they were trying to leave themselves discretion. You know, they want this to work. I mean, that's the bottom line. They didn't want to be, they didn't want to be punitive. When things go wrong, things go wrong for everybody. And all of a sudden, if they close somebody and they don't take the repos, everybody's like, well, can I use the repo? If they don't, if they didn't on the reciprocal, you end up destroying the program. So they were very flexible in that. So that's why. And again, I think for the most part, the compliance has been solid. But no, we're both undefeated, and no, it's a fun time in terms of mine just to be able to talk to the people who are writing the regulations. I'm sorry, a little long-winded. I come from a family of barbers, ministers, and lawyers. You know what they all have in common? They all love to talk. Do you have a barber that loves to? Does your barber love to talk? I don't know. No?
Look at my hair. Do you think I really barber that much?
Yes, I do. You may not go off and they got more to talk about.
2 swipes and I'm done.
That's a short conversation.
It is.
Other questions you got? Oh, I know what to say. Yeah, they call it to unwind. I'm sorry, let me finish that thought. And that's when we got into the whole thing of you need to issue a regulation that says basically if you've done X, Y, and Z, that it just passes through the process because they didn't want to make, it's like, it's really silly because they were all over collateralized and it was just going to make a bunch of work. And it's like, okay, if I can take $2 million of securities, put it back on the bank's balance sheet, pay these people off. And again, a lot of banks end up with, they have programs that require involved almost all of them. So, and they just swing into the program.
So just to clarify now, you're saying that they typically just move the securities back into the bank portfolio, but the protected depositors get a full payout?
Yes, they are fully covered because they realize in order to get the securities, they got to pay these people the money. And there's it gets a lot of complications, as you know, in terms of was it an acquisition or was it a transitionary bank or whatever. But again, my point is there's nobody who's ever lost money by being in a retail sweep agreement.
Is there a maximum amount of securities you could have in repo comparatively? Okay.
No, I mean, it goes back to your balance sheet.
Right.
I mean, in terms of how you, otherwise from a business standpoint, structure your balance sheet. But no, if you want, I mean, I'll jokingly say, I think the only limitation might be a CRA limitation that's indirect. And then say if you raised a whole bunch of money, bought a whole bunch of securities and blew up your small bank CRA test, that would be the only thing because you'd be under 50%, loan deposit kind of situations. But no, there's no restriction whatsoever. Thank you all, appreciate it. Again, I've tried to stay educational and not do too much commercial. I can't, help myself a little bit as well known as a banker. So what I'm going to do is turn the program over for a quick presentation by Ann Bailey. Ann and I went to junior high together, so that's how small town we are. Close friends with my wife, and she's worked in defense, she's worked in technology, and now she's works running Stratton. So she's going to talk a little about the program that makes this like super easy. So you don't have to worry about all the stuff I just talked about.
Yeah, this seems to be working.
Oh,
I'm trying to use it.
Good. Well, I feel a little bit like I'm set up for maybe success and maybe failure here. I've seen Joe struggle with this, so we'll see.
Right, yeah, set it down and I'll pick it up.
So I've known Joe for, gosh, over 45 years. And this is the first time I get to slightly correct him. And you're going to be like, what is she talking about? So back in March, when all the bank failures were coming through, customers were not throwing out their confirmation reports. That was the only time that they were really happy to get them. Usually they're like, how can we turn these emails off? My gosh, they're a nuisance. And we help them set up rules in their email basket so they can shoot them off to a folder. But that's when they were actually reading them, and then they were calling the banks to have the banks walk them through. What are these? What do they mean? And that I know that because the banks were calling me. What are these? What do they mean? And so that transpired. Our conversation with Bankers Bank is we had a lot of institutions at that time calling us and saying, we think maybe our process isn't up to date. And I was like, well, let's take a look at it. And we'd go through the program and I'm like, yeah, it's probably not up to date here. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll keep it short and sweet. Our product that we're going to talk about today is Bank Suite Manager. Basically, our solution is built like a house. So we have 4 pillars. We have the custodian agreement. We have the agreement between the bank and the customer for the overnight repo. We have the software, and then we have the process. And you need all 4 to work, really. Now, can you do this manually? Yes, you can, but you can have multiple failures in any of those areas. Can you have a failure if you have the software? Yeah, if you don't keep your processes up to date, if you're not if you're not filling in the custodian, if you've changed custodians and you didn't fill that in, yeah, it can fail. If your customer's email changed and you're not, sending them the confirmations, or if you're not updating your securities, and I've run into that a lot. So I'm going to talk about each of that and how our product, what it does essentially.
It only works when I touch it, apparently.
Okay, so as Joe said, it's a solution built by bankers for bankers. Joe originally developed this essentially to help make the process easier in-house. So we do use this ourselves. And I use our operations team kind of as our guinea pigs. I do quarterly roundtables with all of our customers too to see what they like, don't like, what would you like improved, what would you love if we had it, what do you really hate? And we use those to plan our next product upgrade, and we do those annually. But we rely on the solution ourselves. Basically, how it works is we now have automated imports. So you can tell the software, and I'll go through this a little bit. Your core, you can time the reports and schedule the reports from your core and have them delivered to a file on your server. Our software will go get that at a designated time whenever you tell it, import that from your import that file, and it'll upload that into the software. And then it does the same thing with the securities. So if you schedule that, and then it runs until it doesn't. So it runs until you either run out of securities or you have a new customer to add. And then it sends automatically daily confirmations to your bank customer. So that's really important to make sure, because you have a new transaction every day. And this is where I get a lot of questions on. Some people say, well, we over collateralize, so we don't update our security pricing every day. And I'm like, well, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, because I can only tell you what the law says. The law says, or the regulation says, is that you have to, it's a new transaction, so you're actually not giving them the right price. So you have to price it every day. I mean, it's part of the requirement that that has to be accurately priced. So your customer's account information and your security information imported daily, automated daily confirmation to the bank customer. And then the last one, if you click it, there we go, automated account list to the custodian. So this is where Joe, as Joe mentioned, that makes sure that your customer's interest is perfected. And the FDIC came out with their ruling, and they did a review of all the repos. They came out with their ruling in 2009, as Joe mentioned, and they said, hey, some of these are not being executed correctly. You need to make sure to send the notification to your custodian to make sure that that interest is perfected. So that's that. Real quickly, landing page doesn't look too exciting, but what it tells you is what your previous allocations were at a glance, tells you how much of your portfolio you have available to allocate, and it tells you if you have securities that are ready to expire or mature, or if you need to buffer up your portfolio. Next page. Confirmation. So this is where everything's set up. This is a one-time deal. You set everything up in here, so you can set up, you can put your logo in, you can basically set up anything. You tell it where to send the email messages, who's your custodian, and if you want to send email reports, or if you want to print them. If you have customers that still want to print printed reports, you can do that as well. Process automation. This is new. This is coming. We're introducing this in June 15th. This is where you can go in and set it up one time and say, go out and grab that file from the core that the core delivered, go out and grab the file from the securities, import it, allocate it all to the customer accounts, all that collateral, and then send out the confirmations to my custodian, to my customers. And it will keep doing that until you have a new customer, because the new customers have to be set up. So we have to know every customer has a preference in terms of what types of securities they want to use. So you have to tell the program, yeah, or if some customers want to be over collateralized for whatever reason. The other thing that the program does is that it maximizes the use of your securities. So it uses, as Joe mentioned, the fractional interest. And then if customers do have a preference, they say, you can only use treasuries. I don't want you using agencies. It'll go and allocate those first through the program and then do everything else later. So it maximizes the use of securities. So we set it up so our core runs, let's say theoretically the core runs at 2 a.m. So there's not, end of day processing is all over. There's no network traffic. Core runs, deposits the output file. The program, I tell it, go get it at 3 a.m., run it, import everything and allocate it. And everything works unless I run out of securities or I have a new customer. And then it sends me an email message that says, hey, you need to go in and look at this. You ran out of securities or you have a new customer, go and set it up. Next slide. Reports. One thing that I'd like to mention, I did get a lot of, especially in March, some of the auditors, some of the customers calling me saying, well, the auditor wants to know, so the reports, basically you can go and pull up anything for 6 years. So if the auditor comes in and says, hey, I want to see your custodian reports back from, 5 years ago, you can go grab it and pull it up. Hey, I want to see the confirmation for this customer. You can go grab it and pull it up. And then the auditor will say, how do I know those emails went? I can see the reports here, but how do I know the email went? What our tool does is when it allocates, there's a little green bar that I can't show you here, but there's a little green bar. What that's doing is it's pinging that customer's email server. And so it makes sure that that is delivered, that email confirmation is delivered. So if it doesn't, it throws an error and it would come back as an error report. So if you don't have an error report, you know that their server received it. Now, probably they have the rules set up, it went to a file, and they didn't look at it unless it was in March, but they did receive it. So the other thing is you get your report, so you have your agreement confirmation, your previous allocations, your pledge report, and your account list that go to your custodian. Any questions? Okay. Two parts of our house are the agreements, and these are very important. These are, I tell everybody, these are just as important as software and the process, because these really streamline the process. So again, these were written by the national expert on overnight repurchase and the lawyer. So the nice thing is that they really streamline the process, make it easy, and then they're fully compliant. And so we have auditors that have looked at this. We have never failed an audit since 1996, since we started.
And I had a user ask how much time it takes each day, and maybe it depends on that automation that's coming in.
Yeah, so right now, if I have to import everything manually, I push a button, it takes me 1 minute to import my accounts, 1 minute to import my securities, and I'm being generous, and 1 minute to allocate. Usually I can get it done in 2 minutes, but let's say 3 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah, if you have to add new accounts, you can add them manually if you have to. Funny story, I had an institution in Texas that I was talking to in February. One of their CFOs kind of came to the table because I guess somebody strong-armed him. You have to have this talk with Ann, and he's like, well, our customers really aren't, we're solvent, we're flush with cash, but our customers don't care about, uninsured deposits. And then he was calling me 2 weeks later saying, how quickly can we get this set up and going? And so the reason I tell you that is because, yes, you can do reports from your core. You can also manually enter it if you have to. So he had a couple of very large customers that we had to manually enter so we could get that in there. And we had them up and running within a couple hours. So you have options.
I'm not sure if you can answer this, but in contrast, if they weren't using Bank Suite Manager or something like it, how much time would a banker be spending on that?
It depends on how many accounts they have. I have banks that have about 6 customers, and they're spending somewhere between 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what time of if it's the beginning of the month or end of the month, because you have the end of month confirmations as well, or summary reports.
Is there a threshold to number of customers where you think it makes sense to use software?
I have, like I said, we have customers that do it for 6. We have customers that have hundreds and hundreds, like over 500. So we have, very large customers, and we have pretty small customers. It just depends. I have a lot of customers that have come on recently because they have failed audits. They were doing it manually and they found out that they weren't sending, that their agreements were correct. They weren't sending the custodian the confirmation. They weren't sending their customer the correct confirmations. They were missing something somewhere, either in the agreements or, somewhere in their process. Any other questions? Real quick, this is the Bank Suite Manager tab. So it's, again, one-time setup. So each of your customers, you upload, import every day, and in June, it'll do it automatically. And then you can kind of customize and say, do you want to send an email, yes or no? Do you want to use treasury securities, agency securities, over collateral? So you can do all of this, and you set it up once, and then it keeps on running. So again, until you run out of securities or add a new account. Securities tab. So at a glance, the securities tab, if you were doing this manually, you'd pull this up and say, oh, this one is about ready to expire and this has expired. And these are pledged securities. So if you have large customers or public customers, a lot of public customers like to have pledged securities. And so, but you can also pledge to specific customers instead of pool. And so what this tells me is these are not available to be used in my pool. So our algorithms are going to take those out first and then allocate based on preferences, who uses what, and again, to maximize my use of collateral. That's pretty much it. At a high level, our tool, our whole solution, again, is based on a strong foundation, 4 pillars. So we have the agreements, the agreement with the customer, the agreement with the custodian, the software, and the process, and all of those combined are critical to make it work and to keep you compliant. What I see, it's profitable, as Joe mentioned. I don't think we have to go through that again. Importantly, I think from a community bank perspective, it's important to keep those deposits here locally and keep them in the bank instead of having our customers go to these banks that are too big to fail. So they know that, oh, the government's going to bail out this person or that person. I'm going to move my money over here. We are coming up with marketing programs, and even if you do this manually or come up with a marketing program of your own, keep the money here locally so that we still maintain the integrity of the local community banks. And that's pretty much it. Any other questions?
There's one about fees. Is the software something you buy or do you subscribe to it?
It's a licensed fee, so you lease it. So usually we have 3 years or 5 years leases. We have a flat monthly fee, or you can go to a usage fee. And with that fee comes our entire solution. So it's not just a software license, you also license the agreements as well. So the agreements are included. Yeah.
I have a question on the back side, on the core side. Have you had success with Fiserv ClearTouch?
We use Fiserv, not ClearTouch.
We are on Premier. We haven't had any problems with any of them that we write the interface or work with your people to get because what happens is that all these things are producing, and I won't use the right term, more like CSV, I think, files or something. Yeah. That's what we're getting them to create, is a universal file that then we go out and grab.
Right. Okay. So we can help you write those programs. Yeah. What I was telling Joe on my way up here, I hope nobody from Fiserv sees this. Their report writing is like Crystal Reports from 1993, and I'm like, I would have thought it would have been better, but no, it's not. But we can help you with that.
But that's the good news. That's the good news. It's that old that we can plug in.
Yeah, but we can. But the nice thing is we can schedule it, so you can schedule it to run at a certain time, and you can also schedule it to deposit it in a specific folder, and that's really all you need for our program to work. Now, we have looked at 4 integrations at some point. At this point, frankly, it takes only a few minutes. Most customers aren't interested in paying that. We would have to develop that, which is not the expensive part. The expensive part is having your core provider come in and try to help you plug that in, and they charge an arm and a leg. So in 2025, all of the APIs have to be written in the same language, so the application interface. So that'll help make it a little bit easier, maybe make it a little bit less expensive. So we'll kind of revisit that then. So we've had that question come up too. Anything else?
Just to clarify, effective this month, the core generates a CSV file, dumps it to a network location, and then your software grabs it from that location.
Yeah, it grabs it, imports it, grabs the securities, imports that, and it allocates it and sends out everything. And you don't have to touch it unless, again, you run out of securities, which, I mean, you can keep going. I mean, our department will likely keep going until we run out of securities, and a lot of institutions will too. Or unless you have a new customer to add, which is great news.
There's a few maybe tips and tricks in there. Again, somebody needs to pay attention, CFO, cashier, whatever it is, looks at, say, what's pledged versus what's our average balance. If you run into a customer who really is wild, you may monitor seasonality, or you may even put a cap on the repos. You may say, okay, you can deposit up to $2 million, but I know I'm not going to be able to cover that until, or you have to give me 3 business days notice if your deposit's going to be greater than $2 million or something like that. So you can work those kinds of things out, and we can help you do that, which is kind of one of the things I want to toss in. And you asked earlier, but I think we talked about the exams that we've been through. One of the things, again, we're small, we're a community bank, just like so many of our customers are. Whenever we have an examiner that has an issue that, first it goes to you and it doesn't work. If it's their customer, then it goes to Ann and her team, and if it doesn't work, and they call me. I mean, I'm right there, and I have, I say, so far undefeated in convincing them that we know how the system works, and that we get them the information that they need to. So when we say we've never, we get questions. If we didn't get questions from examiners, that's kind of part of our value proposition is we're right there with you to demonstrate to them that we are fully compliant.
Yeah. And what I'd say is the materials that Joe developed was used by the FDIC to train their field audit team. Now they have the newbies coming in, and where I get a lot of questions are on some of the public sweeps, if they're not set up, because if it's an in-state sweep or if it's an Indian tribe, they're considered in-state. So if you have it set up as a demand deposit and a now account, that account is eligible for $500,000, $250 each. So a lot of institutions will take that off and not have the account set up properly. So that's an issue that typically comes up, or it's out of state and they didn't realize it was out of state. So things like that are usually things that come up for public accounts.
The last thing I'll say is that when you see some of the screens, again, this works in tandem with a product called Collateralized Deposit Manager, which, again, nobody in Iowa will ever use that, but in some states it's usable. So you can actually run the sweep program and the collateralized deposit program. They can be run separately, and the screens, there'll be zeros and that kind of stuff. But if you put them together, you can actually share collateral that way too.
Yeah.
And so somebody can end up using they've got an entire pool to assign out, and you can, and the software works in conjunction with itself, if you will, to make your securities even more efficient. So sometimes when you see I think one of the screens had a corporate maybe mentioned on there. The point is that would always be zero if you're just running a sweep program. But if you were running a collateralized deposit program as well, or just a collateralized, then you could put your corporates or your munis in there.
Right. And we have several really large customers that span several different states. And so they'll use direct pledge. Some of the states they're in are direct pledge, and some of them are state pool. So I was a little anomaly. So they'll use the reports from the state pool from the custodian to give to the Secretary of State for their public deposits. So that eases the burden of reporting, if you will. And then, of course, direct pledge, they're able to do that with the collateralized deposit manager as well.
And I'll give you one more thing is that we have, if you have multiple charters, we have the ability to leverage what I would call an internal reciprocal. So that if you had 2 charters that were both owned by the holding company, you could do the internal reciprocal for $250 each, and then do a sweep on top of that. We have several of our customers that we've worked with, some of the large, actually, one of the very major holding companies in Illinois we work with, and they've got 11 or 12 charters, so they internally have almost $3 million worth of insurance coverage that then we layer on top of that.
Are there any common themes for the end users that you see in the system?
End user for banks or the internal?
No, the customers.
The customers.
Through the banks.
I think again, to me, it usually is only 3 things that we end up seeing are, number one is they want to understand how it works, but they pretty quickly, again, I just tell the story. It's like, if you borrowed money on a security, I'm going to, we've just reversed roles. So most of the people understand the idea that they have collateral. The second is the thing they say is, can you turn off the notifications? That's a common theme because they find that, everybody wants less stuff in their inbox. We say, well, the rule is like the rule is we have to send it. They don't have to read it. So we end up helping, we've got a little cheat sheet on how to help them set up a folder that they can keep forever if they want to keep it. And like Ann said, and then the third time is whenever there's national media problems about banks, they pick up those and say, explain to me how I'm protected again.
Are there any entities that kind of have to have the protection? In other words, You know what I'm saying? Like maybe like legally or, I don't know.
The only ones that legally have to have it are public depositors. And again, that's going to be a state by state
Yeah.
to say whether or not, how, can they be in a repo or can they be in a collateralized deposit position? Every state's very different on that sort of thing. Again, from my standpoint, I would not sit on a nonprofit board if it didn't have a product like this. I mean, I don't know how you could be a fiduciary. I mean, it's not illegal, but if I went out and said, I'm going to put $500,000 in, one bank, if I was on that board of directors, I'd be asking the question, why, these products are so easy to get. Why don't I have either a repo or reciprocal? Why don't I have something to protect me in case something goes wrong? I'm a fiduciary for this. Same thing, corporations, for-profits can make their own judgments about what the cost and benefit of those sorts of things are. No, I'm not, again, other than public entities based on the state law, it's just good practice. And I think we see that practice rise when there's problems and then people get a little lazy when they start getting, my dad used to say everybody's a product for the last 3 years. He died in 2021. I would argue that today everybody's a product for the last 3 months. We change, we pivot pretty quickly.
So yeah, Wisconsin is a direct pledge. So I don't know if do you have public accounts?
We do, we're in Iowa.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
they have their own program.
okay.
Somebody put an endorsement in the chat, said that they use both BSM and CDM. The program is user-friendly, and if I ever need help, the customer service is quick and very helpful. I highly recommend it. I'm looking forward to automated import.
Oh, tell them,
I don't
thank you,
think that-
thank you.
I don't think you planted her. I think she's real.
Oh, thank you. I'll have to pay her later.
We knew that there were 2 customers online. I don't know who that was, but
It is, I mean, to me, I love to talk to customers and Joe loves to talk, so it's a perfect combination. So we love to learn from them, hear what's going on. And I know that if I'm getting a call at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's because it's something, their email server, something happened and I need to jump on that right away. So our team jumps on that pretty quickly to get those resolved.
So we're also happy to provide references, whatever, a multitude of those.
Yeah, but if you guys have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here again, the big thing is to make sure that we keep the banking community, the community bankers strong and make sure that we keep the deposits. One of the things I think for end users you asked about is they're not aware that these programs exist. You talk about the bank crisis, and I listen to, I don't know how many podcasts that were not banking podcasts or finance podcasts that didn't know these products existed. And they're like, well, you have to move your money all around. And I'm like, no, you don't. I was writing like as fast as I could, trying to type into these podcasts. You don't have to, these products out there. And I think the end users don't know. So regardless of what you're using or doing, market to the end users. If you need marketing materials from us, we're happy to provide that, but keep the money in-house, keep it in your community. And with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
We'll turn it over to Riley Olson. He's going to talk a little bit about what your custodian needs once you've got this all in place and any potential pitfalls there.
Yeah, so hello, I'm Riley Olson. I'm my safekeeping rep in the investment department. And like Joe mentioned, there's kind of 3 steps to get the repo up and running. This is going to be the second part, which is the agreement with your custodian, and especially with us here at Bankers Bank, exactly how that would operate. So the first thing we're going to look for is the actual agreement itself. Before we get anything going and the ball in motion, we just want to make sure that it is signed by the bank, sent to us for counter signature. It just basically states that we're going to hold securities that are listed by you in a separate account as a repo obligation, pledged to the repo obligation. And both the agreement can be requested and sent to our safekeeping inbox, which is just safekeeping@bankersbank.com. The second part that we're going to look for are the daily reports that we want to assure are up and running and to confirm that we see the securities that are going to be used and that were provided to us just match up to what we have. And the reports that we are going to look for and actually come exactly from the agreement is that it is going to be the name of each customer that is using the repo, the principal amount of the repo obligation, and the aggregate market value of the securities. And so what that kind of looks like in practical terms in a simplified version is going to be an account list report for the prior day's business, as well as the pledge report, which is going to have the QSIP and the market value of the holding or holdings. And again, what I'm looking for on a daily basis are actually the reports being sent, as well as the market value of the securities and the aggregate principal of the repos. the securities obviously are greater enough to cover the principal repo. And then the third part that will be a part of our getting it up and running is going to be a segregated safekeeping account. It's going to be outside of the bank's main account, just to confirm that nothing's going to be commingled with any other holdings. It'd be a $25 monthly charge, and we would also open that upon getting that first kind of report sent to us, just confirming everything is up and running. And as well that the list of securities that we provided initially match what is being sent to us from that first daily report. Something to note is that our safekeeping reporting that we'd be sending you is not going to have the customer information that you'd send on your daily report to us. It's just going to be showing as the retail repurchase agreement, since these securities are pledged to the obligation, and because they can change daily, we're not going to reflect that other than just saying that it is segregated and pledged specifically to that. If there are changes that ever need to be made, the collateral is going to be substituted on the aggregate. So if it is something like a substitution for a maturing holding, we'd be pulling one out and bringing one in, but then things are still going to change within your daily operations, how we want that. There's going to be a $10 fee to each change. And that's not, again, customer changing, but us moving securities in and out of that segregated account. And for us, and some of our banks might be using the portal website, it's easier for us to operate with just kind of having those requests sent to us, whether it's through our substitution forms or just simply telling us, we want to remove this security for this one. And the same thing, just sending that to our safekeeping inbox, just to kind of make sure that we get the process and operation taken care of correctly. The other piece would be the market pricing that goes along with that, since we do need to see the market value of these securities, not the par face on a daily basis. We do offer that here, which would be for $1 bond per day. And we do then have the ability to use the extract, which would be a CSV file that can be used to upload, whether it's to Main Street Manager, or if you're doing it manually, just to make sure that data is available to be inputted on there. So again, from our standpoint, we have the 3 steps that we're kind of looking for: the agreement, getting that signed and sent back to us. And then the second and third are kind of hand in hand, where we want to see the daily reports are up and running, the securities we saw initially are there. And then as well, once we get that list, we'll open up the segregated account, move those holdings over and pledge them to the repo obligation. And so that was my very brief little presentation. It's a lot easier on our end, and once everything's up and running, to get the repo up and moving. Some contact information for us, as well as Stratton with Joan and
I think a question that might kind of apply to both Riley and Ann. Somebody said, once they're under collateralized, what happens? So I guess if it makes it as far as you and you get those reports, then what?
Well, I haven't gotten one from the Main Street Manager, which makes me would
It
think
wouldn't,
that's not gonna
yeah.
happen.
You shouldn't.
No, so if you're under collateralized, Bank Suite Manager will not allocate, and it'll send you an error message to whoever is on file, the management or the distribution group, that says you don't have enough collateral. You need to go in there and add, and then you're scrambling to add collateral. Once you do that, you reallocate, and you're off and running again.
Do banks typically put their entire portfolio into Bank Suite Manager, or they kind of grab bonds as they need them?
Both. We have some banks that put their entire portfolio in, and they pick and select, so you can go in and select which ones would be applicable, and then you set that up once, and then you don't have to set it up again. So they have I have a large institution that has over 1,000 different securities, and they put everything in, and that way they don't have to slice and dice their reports. So they just then they import into the program the pricing, and the program knows which ones are to be used and which ones are not. So in the program, you can set it up as an active or inactive security, and if you deactivate it, it's not going to be used to pledge.
You mentioned that you don't get under collateralization from Bank Suite Manager. Do you have anybody who's doing it manually that you've seen that?
It's a mix. I'd say for the most part, it's Bank Street Manager that I'd be seeing those from. And when we talk about getting email notifications and ignoring them, I do the exact opposite.
Here,
Look at
here.
those, make sure obviously we got the market value higher than the principal value, but doing my due diligence, but it's also being told now that I'm getting them, it means I'm probably safe to assume that.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, if you get it from, we've had a lot of different custodians that say, if we get the report from Bank Suite Manager, we know it worked. If we don't, then we're calling the bank saying, hey, what happened?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing I'd look for is that the reports just didn't show up, whether it's an issue with the
Right.
email server outgoing, but no, if they're showing up, that's usually a good sign. But
I would say that-
Well, I was just gonna say, there are some people that would, if it's small enough, I think they are manually doing that, just because the assignment of those securities as well as the securities in the segregated account are rated up, I guess, where it may require them to use the Bank Suite Manager, but I'd say the bulk majority is coming from Bank Suite Manager.
I'd like to endorse Bankers Bank. I mean, again, you guys get it, and you understand. I mean, a lot of the bigger custodians are really fighting about what they can do and what they can't do, and they just think to this custodian, I hold this stuff, I don't actually do anything, I'm not a fiduciary. I don't know where that voice came from, but but the point of the story is, like, Bankers Bank's a partner that understands, okay, this is I've got a portfolio, I'm managing, my investment portfolio, but a portion of it's to protect the customer, and I understand the repo piece. And so somebody asked earlier about where we spend our time. We've spent more time over the last 27 years trying to explain to not Bankers Bank custodians about what their job they need to do than we have to bankers, to customers, and examiners probably combined. We've had more custodial challenges, so we haven't had any.
Absolutely. Kudos to Bankers Bank. You guys have been fabulous to work with.
Do you guys speak to turnaround time? Like if somebody doesn't have repos and they want to start,
Do they have securities?
well, I'll assume yes.
Okay. In order to get, from the agreements, get the agreements set up with your customers, we can get the software up and running, within 2 weeks, assuming that you can get your core reports written. And if you can't, ask us and we can probably help you write those reports. But 2 weeks is the software. The long pull is usually going to be the reports from the core and getting your customers to sign those agreements. So.
And I'll say, I know Ann, she's going to under-promise and over-deliver. So if somebody has an emergency, how long does that Texas Bank take to get set up?
2 hours.
2 hours. So
Somewhere in that range.
And the reality is, you got an emergency, and we got, and we got our people, and your core is one of the cores we work with. It'll be faster than that.
Yeah, you're right. We can manually input it. So if we can't get the core piece in place and it's an emergency, we can get that taken care of in a couple hours.
And the rest, what about to add bankers?
Like I said, we're just looking for that first, the agreement to be signed, and then everything really comes to just confirming that we're going to get those reports, which, if they're using Bank Suite Manager, it just depends on how fast that gets up and running, but as soon as that's, confirmed, it's just a flip switch of us moving the holdings, and that will be done same day. And I think I might have forgot to mention that if you are going to use, Bank Suite Manager, if you're going to send your reports, just, those go directly to me versus the safety inbox, since I'm the lucky individual here that gets to read through those every day.
Awesome.
All right, well, we'll send a copy of the slides, and then we recorded this, so we'll send you guys a link to the recording too. So if you want to share this with team members or look back at it later, it'll be out there for you. But thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for your time. Sincerely appreciate it. Thanks.